Well, hello everyone. We're the three gigs minus one.
Minus
Usually,
one.
usually it's Jim. Three guys in glasses. Right? Jim, who represents the general contractor. I'm Paul, representing the subcontracting community, and Craig, who normally represents the owner. However, today, because of our subject matter and the absence of Jim,
And because I am,
and because he was and is a general contractor, he represents the general contractor today.
right.
So today's subject is the all important GC, general contractor, subcontractor coordination meeting. When I was at the field level working as a foreman, we would just call these things the foreman's meeting. And it was a concerted effort of all the trades that would be on the site presently or those that might be coming on within a few weeks to come to the site and to coordinate with one another and ultimately with the general contractor that work that was coming up, any issues that were being faced, problems on the horizon. Obviously, we would want to focus on safety, schedule, and anything that would represent blocks in the road to hinder productivity.
And how did you feel about those meetings?
Well, a lot of times they were a pain in the rear, and I didn't want to be there. Often I was a working foreman. One of the very first experiences I ever had was being drug off a loader. I was, supervising from the seat of the loader, and there's the general contractor superintendent, shouting at me, telling me to get into the foreman's meeting that I knew nothing about. My first experience with a foreman's meeting. Many times they were valuable, but a lot of times I felt that they were just an interruption to my
Work.
work
Getting the
because
work
I
done.
didn't care what was going on until I did. And then it was
Right.
interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about that dynamic
Yeah.
of getting in good involvement in that meeting.
Well, you're not alone in any of that feeling, and that's why we always had. And after reviewing many subcontractors with other contractors, it is very, very typical that we understand that it's tough to be the field and to be out there and break for 1 day a week for an hour. Usually it's in the morning. We try and get it early. But we we very typically put in our subcontracts penalties. If you don't have somebody represented at that meeting, then you're gonna, and it's not bring donuts at the next meeting.
It's a deductive change
it's money.
order.
It's a deductive change order because these have, I think, really become embraced by the GCs as a very, very important, useful tool to make sure people are at least talking together once a week.
Sure. And I think I appreciated it a lot the more I understood the value of it because, for example, we would be required to submit a 3-week look ahead schedule. And then if there was no mechanism in place for us to actually review that 3-week look ahead schedule with the other trades to see if it was in fact coordinated, I think we would feel a little bit like that high school student that gets assigned some homework that seems meaningless at the time, and then it's meaningless when you go back to class and they don't even review it
Right.
for completeness or for correctness, and you just kind of felt like you were doing busy work. And so the value becomes more obvious when we actually get in those meetings and we discuss those 3-week look aheads
Right.
as they actually melt together and see the work moving forward on the project.
And those are important just in terms of what's really going to go on after that meeting. So I've got meetings with owners and architects. Once a week, I've got usually a OAC or owner architect contractor meeting, and I'm presenting a 3-week look ahead. And I typically would make sure that the subcontractor meeting was at least a day or two before whatever day my OAC meeting was, because I wanted to get the 3-week look aheads, because I have to make a 3-week look ahead.
Sure.
I want to find out what the problems are that are happening out there, and is there something that needs clarification. That process will take care of itself over that next few days, but I want to know about
Sure.
it, because when I'm in the hot seat in my meeting with the owner and the architect and the bank and who knows who else is there. I don't want to sound like I don't know what's going
Exactly.
on. So I need those meetings so I know what's
Right,
going on.
exactly. So then a guy like me would come in and I would explain the impact of a discovered differing site condition, for example.
Right.
You know, hey, we found something that was undocumented. Hey, there's a gas line out there. Everybody needs to know about it. But more importantly, we're going to have to work around it. It's going to resequence this work,
Right.
And it's not just a notification that we're resequencing the work. Everybody that is going to be close to that work
Yeah.
needs to also understand the impact on their work.
Yeah, that's the value of that meeting. You know, there's you found something and it's a problem. Your office is going to do an RFI or ask for clarification. There's going to be a document about that thing. The real critical part is the other trades that are working, who are going to leave that meeting and go to work
Right.
and work on things. It's where everybody finds out, you know, what's the landmine today.
Right. New direction.
New direction.
Right.
You know, when I came into this meeting as a sub, I thought, or as you, when you came into that meeting, when you were done, you knew you were going to go back out to that loader and you were going to continue to work on what you were going to do. I'm sure there were times you would come out of that meeting and go, boys, it's a different.
Right.
We're going in a different
Now
direction.
I'm making contact with my office.
Yep.
I'm sometimes stopping delivery of equipment and materials, going in a completely different direction. Other times I'm ordering new stuff, different kinds of equipment. I may even get the opportunity to go into the office and have a more in-depth discussion about plans and specs and how that we need to get on the same page.
Right.
And sometimes we're so far off on our understanding of the project that we have to regroup
Right.
internally.
Right.
So the value was pretty acute at that level. I think we would learn a little more about the other trades, what they do, some of the things that they that would impact their. And I think the other thing that I didn't even realize is, yes, we were always in somebody's way, my trade. I mean, I'm digging in the dirt, and if there are any other trades on site trying to do other things, they viewed me as being in their way. Of course, they were in my way,
Right.
Because I should have been there first.
Right.
That's the real deal. But nevertheless, I would then see the true impact of these various trades upon the other, and you do get a little deeper appreciation. You do get to start working closer together. You understand the needs and the obligations of others, so
Right.
that you can start to filter this together.
You know, this thing started with me creating a schedule that I used to negotiate my contract with the owner, and that schedule, hopefully, I reached out to you and some of the key subs to say, you know, is this going to take 6 weeks or 4 weeks? But that schedule and that contract might have been 2 months, 3 months before we actually all mobilized and got out on the site. So we're all starting from a schedule that might not be fresh,
Right.
really. That input, that freshening up, is an important component of what can happen in these meetings, as you point out. Where are you and what's for me, in terms of scheduling the work, telling you need to be here next week because this is going to happen, telling somebody else. You know, I'm scheduling work based on that schedule first and foremost. I'm talking to you, I'm talking to other people, but as a superintendent, you know, I've got to have a plan that I work with, and that's my plan. And there are inevitably conflicts that we didn't think about until we all got together.
Right.
And we start to realize, oh, this actually isn't going to work.
Right.
Now, as the superintendent, I've got to start figuring out how the conflict for you can get alleviated. I can't send them home. Can they be redirected?
Right.
And out of that, sometimes there is an RFI that I'm going to write.
And maybe even an obligation on your part that you had failed to understand, or
Absolutely.
maybe a whole. For example, I would show up on jobs many times where they thought they had the permits because they had gotten a plumbing permit.
Right.
And that took care of everything on site.
Right.
But I needed to go into the street and there was no engineering permit. We wouldn't even know that. Now, somebody at the office level should have known that, but the value of the meeting was, hey, we need a permit like tomorrow. We
Right.
needed it yesterday, but tomorrow. So I wonder, you're kind of looking back on it, what what constitutes a great meeting? I mean, what kind of preparation needs to be had? What would be the characteristics of a great meeting? And maybe some of the challenges to having that meeting be as effective as possible.
Well, it's got to be regular. It's got to be carved in stone. Everybody needs to know, Tuesday at 6 o'clock, there's a meeting. It's a 1 hour meeting, and you've got to be there. If you tag to be there, you have to be there. It's got to be very predictable.
Right. And then we have to know who's going to be in that meeting, right?
You need to have an agenda that shows who's going to be there. And ideally, your agenda is, after a meeting, there'll be some summary minutes, just notes that will go out, and it should include the next meeting, who's going to be there and what the agenda is, in enough time for the subs to contact me and say, hey, it'd probably be a good idea if so-and-so was also there, because this is going to impact them and based
Now,
on the schedule.
do you distribute those agendas to the foreman before the meeting? Do they actually have a chance to see that? Or?
We would usually just copy it to, we would copy it to the office, sub's office.
And then hopefully it would filter
And then
out.
hopefully, but we also would make a copy and there'd be a stack, where subcontractors, where they
Had to
could
pick that up and make sure
So
they
you
were
could
aware
go
of
in and
get
pick it up if your office didn't do it.
I got it. Okay.
The focus needs to what you don't want to do is make this a working session. So this isn't a meeting that's pretty typical, certainly for even concrete or metal or wood, regardless, mechanical coordination. At some point, ducts and things and plumbing have to be coordinated. That's a separate meeting. That's the mechanical sub, the plumbing.
I mean, the traditional MEP coordination that goes on early and throughout. Right.
So you don't want these meetings to be a detailed coordination meeting.
Like, how long should these things last? I mean,
Hour, max hour.
But see, so that was also a problem, because I would be invited in for a 1 hour meeting, and next thing I know, I'm staring down 2 hours.
No.
And they won't let me leave,
Right.
but there was no reason for me to even be in the meeting anymore.
Which means it is critical that there's an agenda, and the purpose of the agenda. The purpose of the agenda would be, you're going to look at the 3-week look ahead, and everybody's going to have maybe 2 minutes to just summarize where they are and what's holding them up. There might then be some discussion about how that all does or doesn't impact. Anything that really is a problem, we got a problem here, then the right thing to do is for that superintendent who's running it is to say, okay, that's a sidebar.
Right.
You guys can stay after, or we can reschedule, come back at 10 o'clock.
Exactly.
But you've got to be able to sidebar, because you want these things to come up, but you don't want this meeting to be the workout session necessarily.
So
Unless it can be done in 30 seconds.
It actually leads me to another important point. I remember being so frustrated in these meetings because obviously the superintendent, and you were one, the superintendent hadn't been trained in how to facilitate a meeting.
Right.
They should have been trained in how to facilitate a meeting, because these things are so important. And so sometimes it was a free-for-all. Many times it would be the one who had the strongest voice would be able to control the meeting, or the most serious or complex problem would be able to control the meeting. Sometimes it would be the guy that was the angriest at the general contractor would control the meeting, right? Whoever had that thing going on. And in some cases, I remember being told to go to that meeting and make sure you sabotage that meeting by asking, why aren't you paying my change orders, right? And make yourself known. And
write that down.
Are you making that a point? So now there's another thing that happens in this. that I think today we see filtering into these. They aren't necessarily an every week thing, but I think in our prep here we had talked about like the pull planning sessions.
Right.
And so the concept of the pull planning, and that'll be a discussion for another time, but the pull planning session is where the foreman and superintendents get together and actually have these 3-week look aheads. But the more important thing is they have milestones
Right.
that are out there 3 to 6 to 12 weeks out. And they schedule pulling back from those dates to ensure that those dates get met.
Yeah.
And everyone has to be able to say, by this time I can give you this portion of the work. So
Right.
we make a promise to you that when the thing you said you needed on this date, and it's my responsibility to achieve it, I will do that. So we kind of filter those things together, and then these things become more valuable.
And I think over time, especially as more and more contractors have become familiar with pull planning, I've seen where these subcontractor coordination meetings kind of become a little bit of a hybrid, where
Yeah.
where the contractors are trying to incorporate a little bit of that into the structure. At least within the 3 week, and then maybe a quick look out for everybody to weigh in on. That's everybody's doing it different. We can do a video about how to run a meeting.
There you go. We should actually. So another a component then of a good successful meeting would be to have participants that are prepared as well.
Right.
So we disparage the superintendent, the general contractor superintendent, because he's not a good facilitator or he wasn't prepared sometimes even.
Right.
But then if I come unprepared or I lack the authority level to make decisions in that meeting,
Right.
then the meeting becomes irrelevant to others, and so
It
everybody
makes it
comes
tough.
with it, right?
The purpose is to understand where we got a hitch in our giddy up here, and when those come up, sometimes it says, well, can you not? You're scheduled to start on Thursday. What happens if you go to Friday? Or more than likely the other way, you're scheduled to start on Friday. Is there any way you guys can start on Thursday?
Right.
And you may not be the person who ultimately can make that decision. Usually those are, again, if the superintendent's got a system, they've identified that critical action item. And the critical action item is you need to get to your office
exactly.
and you need to get me my answer by 10 o'clock.
Or maybe even you would have connected with me at the field level and said, hey, in this meeting, we're going to be asking you to, it's likely that you're going to be asked
Right.
to adjust your schedule,
Right.
try to come prepared.
Right.
So,
Right.
when I work with superintendents like that, it was actually a joy to have that insight as to what might happen in the meeting.
And this kind of communication's hopefully happening all day long.
Right.
I mean, you talk about subverting a system. I've had projects where I've had subs go to war with each other, and now as the superintendent, you're part of a UN peace negotiation.
Right.
It's easy to go stomp around and say, stop that.
And of course, you were trained to do that too. The UN peace negotiation.
Take
thing.
a hammer and beat on it until it's flat.
Yeah,
That's what
exactly.
you do.
Yeah.
But it's not good to have him talking to that sub and nobody else knowing. It's not good for those two subs to be working out there. It's great that they're working it out, and I want to know about it. I'm a part of that. But the purpose of this meeting is to just make sure that all of the businesses who have a vested interest in being profitable on this job know what's going on at least once a week with kind of the general flow.
Right.
And again, there's probably many times, I'll guarantee you there are a lot of times, after that meeting, there are sidebars happening anyway, where somebody's going to pull you out and say, hey, let's talk a little bit more about this, because I was planning on doing this, and it didn't even come up in the meeting, but it's a nuance. Those kind of sidebars happen because of this meeting.
Exactly.
It's a critical meeting to have.
The other thing, I think the last, well, probably not the last, but the the important thing to the subcontractor is that you actually start to develop affinity with the other subs.
Yeah.
So that they're not always viewed as the enemy.
Right.
Right. So it's so often that a foreman is sent out there to do the work, and they get so myopic in getting that work done that everybody becomes the enemy toward getting
Absolutely.
it, and they don't even want to work together. So just getting people in the same room, and sometimes even airing that out, like you were saying, the UN peacekeeper can be a very important part of
Right.
it. So that, I think, in a nutshell, becomes the essence of what a general contractor subcontractor meeting is, the importance of it, the major components, the things that we would need to have a good, successful meeting. And then, of course, there would be some things that you would want to try to avoid in there as well. You want to eliminate the tempers. You want to keep a short list of grievances. You already mentioned that. You want to take those things behind closed doors. It's
Right.
not for general consumption. You want a well-versed superintendent to be able to facilitate that meeting, and then from time to time you might need the heavyweights to come in to meetings.
And those elements are probably in your subcontract that you will coordinate. You will. But you don't read the contract.
No, well,
That's in your office.
I usually have like this much of
Right.
my scope of work, and that's about it.
And so, as we all have experienced and will experience, just because it's in the contract doesn't mean it gets done. Just because it doesn't get done doesn't mean somebody very deliberately doesn't want to do it or isn't going to do it.
Right.
A lot of times it's they don't know to do it. But there's also just the skill set. This is a group of people who come together who have a very, very narrow perspective of what success is. And as you point out, almost everybody is in their way in achieving what they really need to do.
Right.
And so that's the skill for the general contractor and the superintendent. And that's where that superintendent does need training, because you are a dictator, a facilitator, a negotiator, and a counselor,
Right.
all at the same time.
And it all comes to head in these general contractor, subcontractor
And
coordination
it all
meetings.
comes ahead there.
Let's call that a wrap on this one, because obviously we could speak for a long time
Yeah.
on the importance of it, but I think we've got the major
Yeah, I think we do.
components of this, some of the trips that we could trip over, some of the best practices for having the best one.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much, and we'll see you the next time around. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media platform, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.